Understanding breathing is an essential part of being a metal vocalist. But how do we practice that on our own? How do we increase our ability not just to breathe, but feel our ability to control how much or how little we're using at any given moment? We're talking about air pressure here, and we're talking about controlling that air pressure. And I'll give you a couple examples of how to be able to gauge this in the moment. If you make a hissing sound, kind of middle of the road hissing sound, you'll feel that deeper abdominal pressure that's different from just squeezing with the stomach, and it's different from an ab flex as well. It's a different type of internal pressure, and that's what we're going to develop here, and that's what we're going to start to become more aware of as we do these types of exercises. Now, if I decrease the hiss or increase the hiss, what I'm doing is I'm changing the amount of pressure I'm using in the moment. Now, for these types of hissing exercises, what I like to make sure of is that the sound is consistent and it's staying in one spot. You don't get any sort of wavering. For example, the sound isn't going up and down. I'm not suddenly losing it either. This helps to train the stability of the actions being done by the muscles of the abdomen that are helping to create this type of even pressure. Now, I'll give you some examples. I'm going to take in a deep breath, and I'm going to hold a hissing sound for about 8 seconds. You'll notice no part of my body really tensed up. Nothing squeezed, nothing bent in half. I didn't crane my neck, I didn't lift my shoulders. I focused everything down into the area of the diaphragm to help feel my ability to control that amount of sound, and no more and no less. Now I'm going to hold a slightly smaller hiss for more time. I'll hold this for 16 seconds. And then be done. And you'll notice there as well, I'm not running out of air either because I've decreased the amount that I'm letting go. This helps me to feel smaller amounts of pressure and be able to hold that for longer amounts of time. Versus a louder hiss for like 5 seconds, let's say. That's a lot of pressure, but you do want to feel your ability to gauge yourself up there as well if you feel like something really needs that little extra push. Now, even though it's a much louder sound, it's not that much more pressure. The important thing to realize is that larger hiss, that louder sound, is the maximum amount of pressure that you will ever need for anything ever again forever. No sound that the human body makes requires more pressure than that. And more often than not, even the louder ones, like metal vocals, for example, actually require less. So getting familiar with this kind of hissing and these types of exercises will really help you gauge your ability to feel that type of control. Now, varying degrees of air pressure with the hissing sound is very important, and eventually you want to be able to feel not just your ability to stay within one amount or another, but kind of glide between them. I'm kind of going to draw an arc here, and I'm going to hiss at the same time. I'm going to increase as I move up and decrease smoothly as I move down. Hear how there was no choppiness in there? And again, no part of my body froze up or started locking up either. I just started from nothing, built into a louder hissing noise, and then very gradually and smoothly, I decreased. I'll do it again. This will help you to feel all of those in-between points and the varying degrees of air pressure that you have available to you at any given time. Example, depending on what type of vocal I'm doing or what point in the song, if it's a busier section or a more drawn out section, I can choose anywhere in that arc to kind of sit, to have be the air pressure I'm using at any given moment. For example, I could go all the way up to that top point if I so chose, or I could stop just underneath. I could stop just past the bottom. I could start in the middle somewhere. It's up to you. Remember that you're the one in control of how much or how little air pressure you're using at any given time. Now, another thing that helps is to increase your overall lung capacity. And in order to do this, I like to take a nice deep breath, remembering the use of the diaphragm. And I'm going to take 3 additional sips of air. Hold it for a second, and then let it out. Nice and even. I'll do it again. Nice deep breath. 3 sips. Hold. Not yet. And release. And you'll feel that kind of internal stretch here. Over time, you'll feel the amount of air that you can take in increasing, and you'll do so by gradually stretching things out. This helps to stretch out the muscles of the chest. It trains some flexibility in the rib cage as well, and it helps your lungs to really lower into that space that you're creating with the diaphragm. Now, granted, there is a finite amount of space in your body that you have, so don't force this too much, but the more you practice this, the more your body will be accustomed to holding on to this amount of air at any given time. So when you go to vocalize, this type of breathing and this amount of oxygen in your system won't come as a huge shock. Now, controlling that air is another thing, and we want to create direction with the way we breathe. Not just with our air pressure, but where we choose to aim our sound at any given moment. Down the line, this also helps with things like projection, but we'll get into that later. I like to think of this as it's been taught to me in the past, either by throwing a paper airplane at something and feeling that kind of subtle glide, or the kind of feeling of shooting a bow and arrow at something and feeling the difference in pressure. Use these types of imagery to pick a target when you're practicing your breathing, aim right at it, and choose the velocity at which you're breathing out. And this will help you, again, to gauge that type of control, but also feel a sense of direction when it comes to using your air. This will all help to make sure that in the moment, you aren't just breathing as big as you can and just letting all the air fall out of your system. Because that would be a huge waste, and it's actually a huge strain on the body as well, to have the air just fall out and then replenish and fall out over and over and over again. This ends up working the muscles a lot harder, and you'll feel tired faster. You'll get very burnt out very quickly if you aren't careful about creating control and direction for yourself. Now, it's important to know your tendencies. Everybody reacts to this type of training in different ways, and different parts of your body might react depending on how much tension you're carrying at any given moment. One recommendation I have for you at home is to practice in the mirror, and practice in the mirror with your breathing as often as you can. Now, for some, this is a little uncomfortable, but what this does, and the benefit of this, is it shows you what your tendencies are. When you're breathing, you'll be able to see if maybe your right shoulder is suddenly cramping up. Maybe you're squeezing with your hands a lot. Maybe you're making a funny face. And unless you have someone else in the room with you, you're not going to be able to necessarily tell what's happening in the moment because you're concentrating so hard on what's going on. This will help you to familiarize yourself with what your own tendencies are so that you can become aware of what's more likely to happen in the moment, so you can calm those down before you even begin. And this is how you can start to work past these type of tendencies and be able to move forward with your breathing, knowing that you are able to, on command, calm everything down. Now that takes time, which is why I recommend practicing these sort of things on a daily basis. And it doesn't have to be for terribly long either. 5, 10, 15 minutes tops. And the thing about this is, like I mention all the time, you're going to be breathing anyway. So you may as well practice like this. Now, like I mentioned, different parts of the body might get a little stressed out. So one thing that will help is to make sure you really stretch everything out from the bottom up, your entire person. Make sure you're nice and relaxed before you get started, and you'll be that much more aware of what's going on in the moment. These are just some examples of ways you can practice your breathing. So go ahead and test these out on your own, and you'll start to feel your ability not just to increase your overall air capacity, but to control that air and do something with it.